Joseph was accused by his master's wife of trying to violate her, trying to rape her. And his master had some questions on what the real story was, so he didn't kill him. He put him into jail. And then now we have this story opening up here. The Torah connects them. After these things, what do you have a story, it goes in sequence. You don't have to say it was after what just happened. You don't start a new sentence and right after this happened, you're telling a story. And you say one thing, and then you have another sentence, and right after this happened. It's in time sequence, a normal story. So the rabbis have a very interesting interpretation. Take a look at Rashi. Since the cursed one, Potiphar's wife, made the righteous one, Joseph, a common topic of the mouths of all of them, sex scandal, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought the foul deeds of these men, of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, so people should start, that should be...
Wipe it off the front page.
Or you take it off the front page and put this on the front page. I mean, that is so terrible. For the very simple reason it's terrible.
Well, then,
why is this terrible?
I didn't hear what?
What?
I didn't hear what you said. Why is what?
What the rabbis are saying doesn't make any sense. Because the rabbis are saying that Yosef was on all the front pages of the news. And God didn't want the people should be talking about Joseph's indiscretions, even if they're true, not true, but he'd be in the mouth of everybody talking about it. So God made a major political scandal. So people now, he took it off this and put in a Washington scandal. Right? That's what Rashi said. That makes literally no sense. Why does it make no sense? Political scandals don't really sell newspapers. When there's nothing to do, you talk about political scandal. But a sex scandal, that's a real scandal. That's a real scandal. That's the yellow... Journalism is much more than political scandal. So what is it saying over here? How do the rabbis say something? And what's compelling the rabbis is because the Torah says, after this happened. Of course, when there's a timeline, you don't have to say, after this happened. No, you're saying that there's a specific reason that God made this thing happen. Why? Because God wanted that people shouldn't be talking about Joseph. They should be talking about the baker and the butler. By the way, the baker and the butler, the word is sire. Doesn't mean they're a baker and a butler. No one's talking about bakers and butlers. It means he was the one in charge of, he was a cabinet position. One with a cabinet position in charge of food, bread, and the other cabinet position was in charge of drink. Kings had, that's the way you measured the legitimacy or the importance of their government, of their position, is whether they had drinks. Like you drink Drambuie. Ricky, I really apologize. I'm sorry. Ricky was here before anybody else, but that's...
He's here.
Anybody drinks Drambuie sees there's a whole thing. This is what Bonnie Charles, Prince of Scotland, used to drink. There was a royal drink. They didn't give out a royal drink. Okay, so that was the position. So we're not talking about just a baker and an employee in the White House. We're talking about the minister of food and the minister of beverage. By the way, like in a fancy hotel, that's a very high position. There's the sous chef and this, and then there's the food and beverage. That's two different positions. Anyway, so what's going on here? The rabbis don't say anything stupid. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is, if we get the understanding here, and I think everybody's going to agree to it, it'll be a life-changing insight. Okay? Why? Let's read the next sentence. This sentence. It was after these events happened, there was a sin done by the beverage man, cabinet position of beverage to the king of Egypt, and the baker. Ladonehem to their master, the king of Egypt. Did anybody see something strange about the formulation there? This is the drink, the one who was in charge of drinks, the one in charge of food. Sin, or leave out the first time the king of Egypt. They sin to their master, the king of Egypt. It has the king of Egypt twice in the sentence. They were the king of Egypt's beverage and food man, and they sinned to the king of Egypt. Very strange formulation, right? One of the king of Egypt, just identifying was not really that important. They sinned. It should say they sinned. The baker and the butler sinned to their master, the king of Egypt. Not the baker and the butler of the king of Egypt sinned to their master, the king of Egypt. It says twice the king of Egypt in the sentence. Okay. And the next sentence. And Pharaoh got angry at them. Right? And he throws them in jail. The same jail where Yosef is located. What's difficult about this sentence? We're trying to learn how to read. What's difficult about this sentence? We're all starting with preconceived notions. You know nothing. If you just read the sentence, what doesn't make sense in the sentence? His name is changed. Until now, who are we talking about?
The king of Egypt.
And now who are we talking about?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Very interesting. We all know the king of Egypt is Pharaoh. That's already waved many times in the Torah before. Let's go to the end of the story. You know, they're there, they get an interpretation. If you take a look at sentence 11, in the dream, the butler says, I saw a vine sprouting forth, and the drink of Pharaoh was in his hand, and I took this and I squeezed them to the drink into the cup of Pharaoh, and I put the cup in the hand of Pharaoh. So what name appears there? And not only that, it accentuates Pharaoh, Pharaoh, Pharaoh. And then you go one last time. When he interprets it, in 3 days, Pharaoh will return you to your position, and you'll put the cup in his hand like the way you used to. And then he tells over the dream to the baker tells over his dream. And I'm bringing food to Pharaoh, all Pharaoh. In 3 days, Pharaoh will hang you. And sentence 20 on page 445. On the third day, the day of Pharaoh's birth, Pharaoh made a party to all his servants. He reinstated the butler, and the baker he hung. That's the story. We all know that. It says 8 times afterwards. He's not once called the king of Egypt. 8 times Pharaoh, and very irrelevant seemingly. And who cares? There was a birthday party. Wow! I hope everybody, birthday parties are nice events. But what was the weather that day? Was it a balmy day? Was it cold? What's going on over here? What's going on over here? Who cares? The Torah doesn't give irrelevant message. The difference between, and this is true throughout the whole Torah. What do you think the difference between the when you say the king of Egypt or you say Pharaoh?
One is personal and one is national, and the other one is personal.
Which one is personal?
Pharaoh. And the king of Egypt is a national.
King of Egypt is king, but what do you mean Pharaoh is personal?
It's talking about him.
Donald?
Yeah. It's human.
Torah would be in the dream next. In next week's story, he had a dream. And what's the dream? Where's Pharaoh? Pharaoh is standing on the water. It was a funny, Pharaoh standing on the water. Jesus stood on the water. What do you mean Pharaoh standing on the water? I mean, it's because Pharaoh is a deity. And the Yoreh, the Nile River, was the way he expressed Li Yoreh. The sentence says, this belongs to me. I'm the deity of Egypt. And Pharaoh didn't go to the bathroom, as we know the stories in the book of Exodus. He pretended not to go to the bathroom. He used to bathe early in the morning, so he wouldn't go to the bathroom all day. And people thought he was a deity. What's the difference between if your ruler is a deity, or what's the difference if your ruler is immortal? Because King of Egypt is a mortal person. Pharaoh is immortal. What's the difference if your king is a mortal person or he's immortal? With the mortal king, who holds the power?
It's a higher force. With the mortal king, there's someone above him.
Oh, people have to recognize him as
What?
king. The people have to recognize him as a king. If you're immortal, it doesn't matter because you're above all of it anyway.
Because
if you're immortal, you're above everything. If you're king, theoretically, the people have to recognize.
you mean if you're immortal?
Yeah.
The king is mortal. The pharaoh is immortal.
Right. So what's the difference between mortal and immortal in
Well,
principle? What?
If you're a king, the people theoretically have to recognize you. They have some things to say about it. The king does. If people don't want to recognize the king, he's really not the king. But if you're immortal, it doesn't matter because you're in another atmosphere.
Well, that's exactly. I would put it a little different. That the Mishnah says there are 3 crowns the Jewish people are crowned with. One is the crown of Malchus, of kingship. Who's the king? Judah, the family of Judah, King David. It doesn't say that. Whose crown is it? The Jews got 3 crowns. So whose crown? So what do you mean? What do we mean that Judah is the king? We got the crown, not Judah. The answer is king. The seat of power of every king is in the people. He rules by their behest, or by their, as Ron says, by their, their consent. He's the ultimate seat of power. The ultimate seat of power of a king is the people. He's the ultimate seat of power. A deity created you. He's God. You belong to him. He doesn't need your fealty to be able to control you. He doesn't need your respect. The king needs your respect. What was happening here, this was a cataclysmic event for Egypt. This was not, that there was a Trump abused women and therefore Donald is, anybody but Donald. That would be a political scandal, right? Because he's a person. If he's a deity, that means the whole culture of Egypt, the whole tradition of 2,500 years is being uprooted. That it's no longer a relationship with a human being, but it's an immortal relationship. And therefore, our whole culture is different. Another way to put it is that a king creates morality. A human being, a mortal, doesn't create reality. He's subject to morality. And therefore, if you don't think he's moral, you get rid of him. Anybody but him, you get rid of him. Because the seat of power is in the people. Immortal, the seat of power is not in the people. The seat of power comes from the deity himself, and he's the one who gave you existence. He doesn't like you, he throws you in the garbage can. And he's the owner, he owns you. He created you, he's your owner, and regardless of what you think about him is totally irrelevant. You better be obedient, otherwise he's going to destroy you. You hear that clear? So this is really a cataclysmic change. Why? When did Paro find out about what the baker and the butler did? Did he know what they did? No. The sentence said he put him in jail to find out what they did. And then they started bringing the evidence and started bringing logical reasons that it wasn't his fault. A fly fell in. A stone means he wasn't careful, which means he's not a deity. He's not omniscient. This story means that Pharaoh's not omniscient. He doesn't know everything, because if he would know everything, he would have right away dealt with him. He would have known that he was negligent, and he doesn't take any great, there's a logical, he would have known. He would have got rid of him. Or actually the fact that he put him in jail itself meant that he wasn't sure what to do with them. He's not exercising his rights of immortality, and therefore the culture of Egypt has now totally been, you've uprooted a country that has a legacy for 2,000 years already. It's more, it's 2,500 years since creation, and you've suggested that you're dealing with a mortal. That means you have to start reevaluating his decisions. You have to think, are they moral? Are they not moral? You don't just blindly follow him. The other way we would put this is, in a country where a king is immortal, you don't sacrifice your children to him. And the culture in society was the human sacrifice. Human sacrifice only is a function of what? If he's a deity. So you bring a sacrifice to a deity. It's your privilege to give your life but to the deity. But where you're immortal, you're the seat of power. What are you killing your kid for? It's exactly the opposite. And now the story makes a lot of sense. This is not a scandal, political scandal. It's a cultural shock to the people that, hey, until now we haven't judged the morality of what Pharaoh does, and now we have to start thinking about is our lifestyle moral? So is it moral that we don't let people leave Egypt, we control them, and is that moral, or is that right? And it's actually very important for the whole story later on of the enslavement of the slaves. If he's a king, the people have some responsibility there too. You're the seat of power. You're responsible that he enslaved the Jews. If you're just blind, it's the master leading the blind. It's Mao. It's Stalin. They do whatever they want. And they killed 30 million people, Stalin said, for collectivism. That's no problem. That's no problem. I think he said 15, and Mao said, I killed 30. What's the big deal? Because he owns them. He does exactly what he wants. There's no rights. There's nothing in a country. It's a whole different thing when you're the king is omniscient or whether you're a king. Okay, that's a very intelligent analysis of the script. Just reading what the text says. Why is this relevant in a house? This is the foundation of every home. Who owns the home? Who's the seat of power? I am. I'm the father. I take, you do what I say. Do what I say. Yiches. Pop, why are we doing this? Because I said so. Why do we do this? This is my house. You do what you want in your house. Even if you say it in a nice way and you don't slap him across the face, that's the feeling. You support him. You're charged. Once you say that, what you're really saying is you're in charge. The children are in charge of a home. The wife's in charge of a home. If you don't support her and you don't take proper care of her, she's the seat of power. A king is the one who takes care of them. He has a commitment to them. But every Jewish king is the same way. The Jewish king also has a responsibility to protect them and of feeding them and protecting them. That's the obligation of a Jewish king. But the seat of power is not the king. He's the vehicle to serve them. A king, as the language of the Talmud says, what do you think I am? A king or a dog? You think that I want to take from you? I'm a king. I want to serve you. That's the expression of the Talmud. A dog takes, a king serves. A king is a servant. He's really a public servant. The definition of public servant becomes blurred sometimes. The king thinks it's public servant means the public has to serve him. and they're the servant to him. And the real definition, he serves the public. He serves at the will of the public, at the consent of the public, but he's only a servant. And that's what a husband is. A husband in a house is a servant. He's serving the children, he's serving the wife and the children. And they don't want, they get rid of him. Get out. I'm not interested in being with you. There's no respect. We leave the house. I'll live outside, which is what's going on today in many, many homes. It's not an issue here of power over our children. It's an issue of serving them. And if we have that mentality, that's a whole different mentality. As a parent, to understand that our goal is to create a healthy family, and if I don't do that, I'm not the father of the house. The fact that I'm bigger, stronger, and make up rules or own the house doesn't make me the father of the house. It makes me an ogre in the house, and they don't treat me with respect. They don't treat me like a king. You're only the king of the house if you take care of them, and if you serve them properly, then you're the king of the house. A king serves the people, but the seat of power is in the people. King David, Mashiach, he's not the master over the people. The Jewish people have the malchus. They have royalty. And this is a mistake that many of us make in our house. Some of us don't support our wives properly. So that itself, by definition, means you're not the king. You shouldn't be making any rules. You're not a king. You're not serving them. But even worse than that, we don't respect them properly. Respect means that you have to put them on a pedestal. You have to make them feel good about themselves. If we don't do that, we're not the king of the house either. Right? We're just somebody imposing ourselves on the house. And that's a dysfunctional family. A family where the father does not respect the wife, or the father doesn't treat her like a queen, is not a family. A Jewish family, which is the cell of the Jewish people, is a place where the father is the center of the house, but that center is because he's serving. And that serving, the Rambam pulls it right out of the Talmud, requires three things. You have to honor her more than yourself. You have to love her like yourself, and you have to spend money on her according to what you can afford. That means that I could afford to buy a tie for $200. It wouldn't make me broke, but I can't spend $200 on a tie. You get it on the internet for $5. You're not going to spend $200. How about if my wife likes designer clothing, and it's not going to break me? I have to do that. That comes right from the Talmud, and that's what the Rambam says. You have to spend according to what you can afford on her. I'm planning for my retirement. You're not the fiscal manager of the house. She's in charge. You have to discuss it with her, but you have to make sure that she's getting her needs. You're not going to be in the poorhouse if you're worth $1,000 less because she spent one time.
Olive it should be $1,000.
What?
I said olive oil should be $1,000.
Most of our wives are very conscious about security. That's the main reason they got married. So they're not going to be fiscally responsible. They just don't want you having your Porsche and your Porsche. No, your Porsche, what do they call it? With the top down, what do they call that?
Convertible.
Your Porsche convertible. That they're very fiscally responsible. Women are much more fiscally responsible than men. They don't spend money on toys. They spend money on clothing, and clothing adorns a person. Clothing gives them a feeling of self-worth and self-esteem. That's why clothing is very, very important to a woman. And it's not a toy. And you have to appreciate that and give her that feeling. Give her that feeling. That doesn't mean she owns the money. Doesn't mean she owns the money, but if she has needs, you have to take care of her emotional needs. And usually they're not going to ask anything that's going to break the bank. They just don't want you going off to Vegas, and they don't want you going off to places that to have, or buying toys. They're not looking for. They don't like that the husband buys toys because they feel that that's fiscally irresponsible, and therefore, you're not really the husband of the house. They are the masters of the house. See, some Rishonim say, of course, they even have a stronger personality than the men, which that's what the rabbis seem to say. They're much stronger. The language over there is that a woman is bone and a man is meat. That's what the pasuk says. Meat is pliable, but the bone doesn't, the unyielding. Now, sometimes that's used improperly. That's usually because we don't know how to deal with a husband. A woman who's treated in the way that she feels, I don't say there's no exceptions to this, but a woman who's treated the way a woman should be treated will feel honored and feel grateful to be your wife and feel you've done everything for her to make her feel good, and therefore she'll function well and will not toughen things out and make it impossible to live with her constant demands. But if we don't treat her the way a wife will be treated, then she will actually be demanding on us. And that's the breakdown of the house. And the same thing with the kids. You don't spoil your kids, but you got to let them know you're interested in their welfare. You're helping them out, and you're interested in giving them a good feeling about themselves. The whole foundation of the family is the ownership of the family is the family. The husband is only the provider for the family. And once we do that, we will then have happy marriages. I'm guaranteeing this. The Rambam guarantees it. It's not too smart. The rabbis, the sages, every word in that Rambam, he picks out of the Talmud. So I'm telling you, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just saying what the Talmud says, and you're pretty good grounds if the rabbis tell us something, we know that's what God, who created the world, tells us that's the nature of a man, that's the nature of a woman. So, yeah, very often there's aberrations, but generally, overwhelmingly, this is the rule that works, and this is what creates a strong. And that's what Jewish people always did. They honored their wives unbelievably. That's what they did. They gave tremendous honor to their wives, and that made the woman strong, made her feel good. And by the way, if you give honor, you don't have to give money. There's no woman who won't take respect over another gift, another diamonds. There's no woman in the world that will or spend more time talking to her. That she wants more time. There's not one woman that will not exchange. I don't care about the trips. I don't care about the diamonds you got me for Christmas, Hanukkah. This also applies to non-Jewish women. But I want you to spend more time talking to me. I want to have some more private time. There's not one woman who won't make that choice. And if anybody thinks they do, that means they're not doing. They've already ruined the relationship so terrible that it's going to be hard to even repair it.
What was the Rambam's three? Honor, spend money. What was the third?
The three things?
Yeah.
Respect her more than yourself. Love her like yourself. And what you can spend on her according to what you can afford.
But don't write it down, that's incriminating evidence.
I have to write it down.
Everybody should have a great Shabbos, a great Hanukkah.